federal judge has scheduled an afternoon hearing today in the case of a Maryland man that the Trump administration claimed was mistakenly deported to El Salvador.
The Supreme Court last week said the administration must facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. The Trump administration now claims it has no way of getting him back on U.S. soil.
Drew Petrimoulx joins us in studio with the latest. Drew, what are we expected to see on this today?
What's up, guys? Well, U.S. District Court Paula Zenas is likely going to want to know what exactly the Trump administration is doing to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return to the U.S. But as we heard yesterday in the Oval Office, the administration is pretty much saying it is powerless to get him back into the country. They say that would be up to Salvadorian President Nayib Bukele, and with Trump at his side in the Oval Office yesterday, here is Bukele responding to a question about that.
Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to have suggested that I'll smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right? How can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
Trump and his top officials maintain that Abrego Garcia is a member of the MS-13 street gang, and they're making the case that because that gang was declared a foreign terrorist organization by the Trump administration, a court order blocking Abrego Garcia's deportation to El Salvador does not apply. Of course, that flies in the face of previous statements by the Trump administration's lawyers admitting Abrego Garcia was deported by mistake. That could come up in the hearing today, set for 4 p.m. this afternoon. Another point of contention is what exactly the Supreme Court meant when it ruled the Trump administration must facilitate Abrego Garcia's return. The administration is scoring that a win because it did not include the word effectuate as specified by Judge Zenas. Under the Trump administration's interpretation, articulated by Attorney General Pam Bondi yesterday, that would merely force them to, say, supply a plane if Bukele decided he wanted to send Abrego Garcia back to the U.S. In its ruling, the Supreme Court said Judge Zenas should provide more clarity about what exactly she thinks the Trump administration is required to do. There is speculation that the judge could move to hold the Trump administration in contempt. Critics of the Trump administration say it is brazenly flouting court orders. Here's Maryland Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen.
It is absolutely unjust and illegal to have this Marylander detained one more day in a notorious prison in El Salvador.
Senator Van Hollen has demanded a meeting with Bukele and says that if Abrego Garcia is not back in the U.S. by midweek, he'll go to El Salvador himself to check on his condition. Niall and Robby.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Drew. We appreciate it. Well, much of the outrage around this case was regarding due process or the lack thereof. But the Trump administration says there was due process. Here's DHS spokesperson Tricia McLaughlin on the Hill on News Nation Monday night.
There is due process. There's a law enforcement sensitive due process. We follow the U.S. Constitution, but it's going to be law enforcement sensitive because these are terrorist individuals. Keep in mind, President Trump designated TDA, Tren de Aragua, and MS-13 as as terrorists.
I'm not sure I'm persuaded by that argument. I mean, you can't deprive people of due process because you simply label an organization a terrorist organization, I don't think.
Well, I think the point is they would contend that he did have due process. Now, they've admitted that they deported him to El Salvador and that they shouldn't have done that. And
right.
Look, on that basis, I think he should be returned to the United States. And then if they want to deport him, they can deport him elsewhere as the process that he went through provides for. I'm not really persuaded by both Trump and Bukele being in the same room and saying, well, no, neither have the authority to, well, then who's, I saw Chase Oliver, my libertarian candidate, say, well, if the government is saying, why do we even have a government if neither of them have the power to release this person? That doesn't really pass the smell test. So, look, I think he should be released and returned because he was mistakenly deported to El Salvador. I do take a little bit of umbrage at this kind of media narrative suggestion or social media suggestion I saw by a lot of mainstream people that he is certainly innocent or something. He did go through a procedure in 2019, where a judge did determine, based on the evidence presented, that he was a member of this gang. That was based on the clothing he was wearing, also what a confidential informant who had previously given credible information about other members of a gang. Now look, I don't know, I can't state for certain. It could be that he is totally innocent and this was an unfair charge, and he is one of people, it happens to people unfortunately, who has been wrongly accused and convicted, and through the due process doesn't guarantee that you're going to get a just result. It's just the best system we have for arriving at a just result most of the time. So maybe that was an unjust result for him. I don't know. But it was not, you can't say there was no due process or there was no attempt to determine whether he was in fact a member of this gang. There was an attempt, the government made its case, and it was persuasive to the judge who looked at it in 2019. And he could be deported on that basis, just not to El Salvador, based on the subsequent claim that he needed a kind of political asylum because he would be, or his family would be in jeopardy from a rival gang, which that itself kind of starts to suggest the connection.
So I think we have to be clear-sighted about what the issue is here. There are, of course, all these specifics around Mr. Abrego Garcia, and I'll get into those in a second. But the question really at its heart is the Trump administration going to obey the law, and is it going to recognize the authority of the courts? Now, the thing that is clearest in Mr. Abrego Garcia's case is there was an order that he could not be deported to El Salvador. The Trump administration deported him to El Salvador.
Right. But not deliberately in defiance of that order. They say that was a error that they should not have done. Well, they're now just powerless to fix it, is their claim.
Yes, which is, I think, a implausible claim, given that, to your point, which in fairness you acknowledge, you had the two presidents sitting about as close as you and I are here, and Trump could quite easily have said, can we have that guy back? And he clearly has no intention of bringing him back. So even if you stretch to make this generous interpretation that the Trump administration just, we made an error, now there's nothing we can do about it. Firstly, there clearly is, in the real world, something they can do about it. They could have asked for him back. And secondly, although they did initially admit an error, their rhetoric now seems to be moving away from that. You had Stephen Miller in the White House yesterday talking about the fact that the Supreme Court had delivered a victory for the administration. In the second sentence of that Supreme Court ruling, there is a statement that the United States government acknowledges that Mr. Abrego Garcia's deportation to El Salvador was illegal. That's just a plain fact. Now, there are indeed other arguments you could make about the media depictions of Mr. Abrego Garcia being on the generous side.
Caring father.
Caring father. I mean, well,
a
judge in 2019, two judges, in fact, in 2019, believed that he was a member of MS-13. Yeah. Now, his lawyer's argument is that was based on primarily two things. One, he was wearing Chicago Bulls apparel, which seems pretty specious grounds, and the other is the informant that you mentioned. The Abrego Garcia side says that that informant says that he was an active member of MS-13 in the state of New York, where he has never lived. That is something that can still be litigated. If he has committed a criminal offence relating to MS-13, he has never been charged with one. He's entitled to the presumption of innocence on that basis. But the fundamental issue is, will the Trump administration obey the law?
Yeah, they should bring him back, take the L on that one, and then continue with whatever procedure accords with the law to have him deported if they want to have him deported. I don't see why they wouldn't, especially because, as you said, the Supreme Court has been pretty clear, and they're going to continue to, it seems they're going to continue to lose in court if they pursue this line of, although, again, if we're not going to go to war with El Salvador over it, if Bukele says, no, you don't get him back, I don't know. It could be. You're right that Trump could exercise diplomatic power to bring him back if he really, really, really wants to.
Right.
And he should. And Bukele has returned other people who were sent to the wrong. This has happened before.
Right.
So they
Trump
should just do that.
Doesn't want to. That's the issue.
They should do it and move on. Yes.
Yes.
Up next, Trump hits back at Harvard. The battle between the White House and the Ivy League is heating up. More rising right after this.